Today's episode of the WAC podcast is brought to you by Hercules Tires, the official tire of the Western Athletic Conference. Now here are your hosts, Eric Danner and Rachel Vigil.
Welcome into the WAC podcast. Eric Danner and Rachel Vigil here with you, talking all things WAC sports. And boy, do we have a lot going on this time of year. I know basketball has ended, Eric, but unfortunately, when we recorded last week's podcast, we didn't have confirmed news about the passing of Oscar Frayer, but GCU has come out and said 23-year-old Oscar Frayer, who plays for their men's basketball team, has passed away, unfortunately.
Tragic news, and the second time in about a month, the WAC family has had to deal with a major tragedy in men's basketball. Of course, Lou Hill passing away at UTRGV unexpectedly, and then Oscar Frayer in a car accident in the San Francisco area. Of course, he's from Oakland, was set to graduate in April. So just truly tragic. His sister was also in the vehicle with him. Last I saw, they did not identify the third person who was also with Oscar and his sister, but just tragic news, Rachel. And we're going to have more on that with Paul Coro in our next segment.
Yeah, and actually, I did see an article. It was an individual from Alaska. I believe it was Anchorage, Alaska, that was also in the car with them. So prayers to the entire Frayer family. I know that his sister had quite a few kids too, so prayers out to them and also the entire GCU family. The WAC sends our condolences there. But Eric, I know you're about to set out on some travels yourself. You're headed to Orem, Utah for the volleyball tournament this week.
WAC Volleyball Tournament this week. It's one of those things, Rachel, we're just going to be cranking out the championships here the next couple of months. So the volleyball tournament this week in Orem, the same place it was our last volleyball tournament, New Mexico State, the top seed. We're going to talk to Mike Jordan in our third segment today as the Aggies won the regular season championship and actually had their best winning percentage in the regular season ever. So hats off to New Mexico State in the season they had. The 2 and 3 seeds are Grand Canyon and Utah Valley. They played each other last week, Rachel, and they split. So if that's any sign of things to come, they'll match up in the semifinals. Should be a fun one. New Mexico State will play the winner of UTRGV and Chicago State. They will play on Thursday, and Chicago State's first time in the WAC volleyball tournament, and they did take a set from New Mexico State, the mighty Aggies, this past week as well. So that could be a fun match as well, the winner of that to play the Aggies in the semis.
So it'll be really exciting. I know lots of good matches coming our way. You can tune in on ESPN Plus, everybody. So make sure and look forward to that. And if you want any of the details, they are on the WAC Sports website as well. And Eric, we're actually celebrating the 1-year anniversary of our podcast.
Hard to believe. Yeah, March 31st was the first WAC podcast last year. And Rachel, about this time last year, I think we're kind of scrambling, trying to figure out what we need to do to keep the WAC news flowing. And that seemed to be a pretty good fit in terms of, we could do it from home because at that time, of course, COVID was taking shape around the country and we're staying at home. And of course, we're still staying at home to a certain extent right now. But yeah, it's been a year. We've had many, many episodes in the past year. So it's been a lot of fun to talk to different people around the league and different, coaches and administrators and sports information directors, players. We've had the gamut. We've had alumni on the show as well. So it's been a very fun year doing this WAC podcast.
It has, and it's been very casual conversations too, and being able to hit on some hard topics, but also some fun topics here and there too. So a lot of fun doing this WAC podcast with you, Eric. I've been very appreciative this past year and getting to work more with you. So it's been a ton of fun. I still can't believe that 1 year. That's just crazy for me to think about. Moving forward with football now, though. So you're supposed to start football next summer, but we're actually starting it this year, and we named the coordinator of officials.
We did. The coordinator of officials will be Carl Richens. He's currently the coordinator of officials for the Big Sky Conference. He's got a long resume, Rachel, and I know it was a very exhaustive process to identify someone for that position, and a lot of people are interested in that job as what the WAC's bringing football back. And you look at some of the coordinators over the years, there are some legendary names, including Mike Pereira, who you see on Fox NFL games now, as he was the head NFL official. He was a WAC coordinator at one point in time. So a very coveted position. And we look forward to working with Carl as the season begins. And well, I guess the season will begin in August, but the practices and everything set to begin in July.
That is just crazy for me to wrap my head around. Football is back in the WAC. I am so excited. But before we even get thinking about football, let's also go back to men's soccer and women's soccer. We've got their championships here in 2 weeks. And for men's soccer, GCU undefeated still.
Yeah, the other kind of football, Rachel, the football, Grand Canyon, and they're ranked in the top 20 now. So they're definitely playing well. Shellis Hyman, we talked a little bit about last week. This is his final year coaching after 40 years as a head coach at both the collegiate and professional levels. And they seem to be sending him out with a bang. They get a 5-1 win over Dixie State. Now they finish with a bang too. They get to play Seattle U and UNLV. So those should be two pretty tough matchups, two tough places to play. Rachel, for men's soccer, the point total will determine the seedings for the WAC tournament. Of course, California Baptist will not be eligible this year, or Dixie State, but the number of wins is the biggie. And right now, Grand Canyon with those 6 wins in first place. But look at second place, UTRGV at 4-0-2. They defeat Air Force. Now, keep in mind, Air Force and Seattle U have won the conference championship, I believe, the last 5-6 years in a row. One of those two schools has. And UTRGV now has wins over both teams, and under first-year head coach Brahim Hancock. So you talk about a coach from his 40th year, and Shellis Hyman to Brahim Hancock has been a coach for a while, but his first year at UTRGV doing a heck of a job. And only 6 teams, keep that in mind, go to the WAC tournament this year. The previous years it was 7, so pared down to 6. So there's going to be a lot of jockeying for those last few positions.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely crazy coming up here in just 2 short weeks for both men's and women's. Like I mentioned earlier, men's being in Las Vegas, women's being in Phoenix. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. And you mentioned Shellis Hyman, who is retiring after this year. Well, the WAC's actually losing another head coach, and head coach Greg Moss from Utah Valley. He is pursuing another career opportunity. So congratulations to him, and he will definitely be missed here in the WAC.
Yeah, stepping down, right now. So in the I wouldn't say the middle of the season, but towards the end of the season here, which is a little bit unusual in terms of, they're I thought in pretty good shape heading into the WAC tournament, but pursuing other job. And then his son, I believe, still on the team as well, Rachel. So Utah Valley, that'll be interesting to see how they react to this. And I know they have an interim head coach name. So the Wolverines with the change here right at the end of the season.
Yes, and we'll definitely keep everybody updated if we find out what Coach Moss will be doing in his near future there as well. And women's soccer, Eric, I mentioned you're headed out to Phoenix here in just a few short weeks. CBU 8-2-1, although they're not eligible to play. California
Baptist certainly making a name for themselves in their 3rd year in the WAC. Last week we had Jared Olson, the women's basketball coach. They went 26-1, went to the WNIT. They were eligible for the WAC tournament. They aren't in the other sports here. So for women's soccer, men's soccer, they are not eligible for the tournament, but the women's soccer team right now in first place in the regular season standings, so they can win the regular season championship. And what an athletic program they're having what a year they're having at CBU, Rachel.
I know. And then you look at baseball too. They're 8-0 in the WAC so far.
It's unbelievable. And they have John Glenn as a player of the week, and they go 8-0, so 2 sweeps. That's tough to do because as you know, Rachel, you have different pitchers for every game. Sometimes somebody has a rough outing, so to go 4-0 in 2 WAC series is really impressive. And then Sacramento State is right up there with them in baseball. They did lose to Dixie after winning 8 in a row. New Mexico State, Grand Canyon right behind them. What this all means, Rachel, is we're going to have a heck of a WAC tournament in Mesa towards the end of May around Memorial Day there. And Seattle U hosting New Mexico State. They had some weather on Sunday, so they're playing on Monday as we record this. And then Stanford, this was a late ad as well, Rachel. They will be visiting Sacramento State on Monday as well. So that's a pretty good get for the Hornets to get the Cardinal to come visit them at Sacramento State.
Yeah, no kidding. And then you also look at softball. They started conference play this past week. Grand Canyon, they went 3-0 against Utah Valley.
They did. Grand Canyon looking pretty good. And so we're in conference playing baseball, conference playing softball, conference playing men's soccer, conference playing women's soccer, volleyball tournament. The WAC women's golf tournament's going to be coming up in about 3 weeks. The WAC men's golf tournament is a week after that. We got the WAC tennis tournaments happening at the end of April as well. So we have a lot going on, even though basketball is now officially over, Rachel. There's still plenty to watch. And again, I think if you turn on the WAC Digital Network, pretty much at any time during the week, you're going to find something.
Another big storyline, Eric, that we didn't mention earlier on in the show is that UTRG filled the head coaching role after the passing of Lou Hill.
Matt Figure comes over from Austin P. Very quickly, they had to hire a new head coach with the passing of Lou Hill. I mean, this wasn't, I'm sure, on their radar at the time, but they find a very quality head coach. In 4 years at Austin P was 76-51 and was 49-25 in the Ohio Valley Conference. So we want to welcome Coach Figure and wish him well.
Condolences to Lou Hill's family still and the entire UTRGB community, but excited for this next chapter under head coach Matt Figure. Excited for them to get this season rolling.
Very excited for that, Rachel. And coming up next, we're going to have Paul Coro from Grand Canyon University. We've had him on the show before. He's an analyst. He's a writer. He actually did a few pieces on Oscar Frayer over the years and has some interesting perspective on the life of Oscar Frayer. We'll talk to Paul Coro coming up after the break.
Hercules Tires is the official tire of the Western Athletic Conference, and for over 65 years has been providing tires with unbeatable quality at an unmatched value. Whatever the vehicle and whatever the terrain, Hercules Tires invites you to ride on our strength. For a retailer near you, visit HerculesTires.com.
And welcome back to the WAC podcast. Eric Danner, Rachel Veal, and Paul Coro, the writer for GCU. Paul, how are you?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Good. I actually feel like I kind of just butchered your name because I feel like you're a man of many traits at GCU.
It's all right. I never know what to quite describe my job as. It's multimedia, I guess.
Well, we're happy to have you on. But unfortunately, while you're on, you're talking a little bit about a sudden death of Oscar Frayer, GCU men's basketball player, but you had a chance to really get to know him. I want you to share a little bit of light on him for maybe people who didn't have an opportunity to have a conversation with him.
Wow, it's really hard to sum up a life like that. He touched so many people at GCU, far beyond basketball. He was, we think he was probably the most well-known, well-liked student on campus, not just because he was a basketball star, but because of the way he carried himself. He had an ever-present smile. Every room's spirit went up the moment he walked in. The practice picked up when he was in it. If he was injured, practice wasn't as lively. That's just the way it was with or without him. But he was also a guy that engaged with people on campus. And, I just heard a story the other day about how he made it a practice of sitting down and having lunch with food service workers in the student union. And it was just like, nobody knew this. Like, he just did this on his own. Just that's the type of person he was. He connected with everybody. And, the security guards in the arena were crushed because they developed relationships in the hallway with him. And there's just so many incredible, heartbreaking layers to this because of the way his last year had gone and how he had really made a self-awareness to do a 180 on his life and had finished his studies. And he had already finished his degree and was going to walk next month. And he wanted to do that to be a role model for his nephews, who unfortunately lost their mom in the accident too, because his sister and his friend also died.
Paul, so much tragedy in that story. And, we've gone through some tragedy here in the WAC, with the passing of Lou Hill just under 2 months ago now, and now Oscar in this terrible car accident. And we had Michael Potter on a few weeks ago, right before the NCAA tournament. We talked a little bit about, Bryce Drew and his first recruiting job being the guys that were already on the team that came back, and among them, Oscar Frayer. And he also mentioned, how he did a 180 on his life and he's due to graduate. What was it about Oscar that I know you talked to him many times that kept him at GCU rather than transferring or maybe doing something else?
Well, first give a ton of credit to Bryce Drew as a new coach and a player he didn't know to bring him back into the program with open arms and support him and lift him up. he did a lot of things for him. Oscar talked about on senior night that Bryce Drew brought him in before the game and prayed for him. And there was lots of things, Oscar off the court was, asking to lead the prayer after games, and, just lots of touch points in that way too. But he wanted to come back to GCU because he called it home. And that sounds like a exaggerated term maybe, but when you think about it, he spent his whole adulthood at GCU, from 18 to 23. So, once he got over, that basketball was kind of missing from his life. And unfortunately, basketball was the thing that helped him when he lost his father when he was 7, also in a car accident, which is the cruel irony of this all, that his mom has to go through this twice with her husband and then her son and daughter. But Oscar filled that void a lot with basketball, and went to his mom at 9 and asked to join a league, and did it urgently, and found a kind of a cathartic way to get through it. And so when it came time that he didn't have basketball again, that didn't feel right to him. And one of the first things Bryce Drew did once he got the job almost exactly a year ago was call Oscar and welcome him back to the program. And Oscar Frayer had to do a lot. He had to really crack down on his studies to be eligible. And then he had to get in shape, because you think about being away from basketball for a whole year, out of practice, out of conditioning, and then to do all that and be a starter again and help the team to its first ever NCAA tournament and the WAC championship. We're all never going to forget those moments of the last couple of weeks of his life, because he was so happy. He was floating around, got his piece of the net tied in his hat, smiling all the time, just bouncing around. Not that he didn't bounce around all the time, but he was really so happy. And the graduating part made him happy too. Sean Pryor is the basketball director of student athlete development. He would say to him, "You got me that paper," because he was just so proud of that.
After the NCAA tournament game against Iowa, did you have an opportunity to sit down and talk with him?
No, unfortunately, because of the tiers with the bubble, the radio, we were doing radio, Michael Potter and I, so we were kept from being in that same group. So all I saw was from afar, but, I kept a keen eye on how they left the court that day. And they left reluctantly. They had so many students that had GCU had flown in for the game, and other supporters. So there was hundreds of people up in that one corner of the arena. And, Oscar was one of the people going over and pointing to him and, making a heart with his hands to him. And, you could tell he didn't want to leave. And then his tweet, like immediately after that day, that's so special for everybody to have and see, that he shared those thoughts about that he bleeds purple and GCU forever. And, it's really poignant. And all the unbelievable tributes that have happened, Sports Center, CBS pregame show, the GoFundMe page that his high school coaches organized for his mother, Bianca Sparrow, and the family, and what it's raised, and the people who have contributed. A couple of NBA guys, Marquise Chris, Jaylen Brown, who hosted him on his college visit at Cal, and Marquise Chris was friends of a couple of GCU players. So it's just amazing. And the local outpouring has been tremendous. The coverage has been really touching and respectful, because there was a couple of days that were really hard there, and they were all very respectful.
Yeah, such a tough time, I'm sure, on campus there, Paul. And, we heard, we saw on Twitter, last week that there were reports of this, wasn't confirmed until a few days later. And, you just kept your fingers crossed. Maybe it was something erroneous, but unfortunately it was true about Oscar and his sister and another person in that vehicle losing their lives in the accident. I know on campus, Paul, or in that area, there's been a lot of tributes going on to Oscar. And I think you've had an opportunity to attend some of those.
Yeah, just on Saturday, some students organized a balloon release where they dozens of white balloons. They met at a park that's right by campus, and there was a couple hundred people there, including the players and a lot of people close to Oscar, past players too. Carlos Johnson, Keontae Vernon were there, and some people spoke. Like Carlos Johnson said some words, and Gabe McLaughlin kind of led everybody to the point where the team did their usual Lord's Prayer together, and then everybody wrote messages on white balloons and released them, and they just happened to float right over campus. It was almost perfect the way it happened. Everybody just stood there in silence, kind of watching them. And I mean, it's eerie, but maybe it's just in what you see, but it sure seemed like the balloons started to make a 4 in the sky. It was crazy.
Eric mentioned a lot of tributes on social media too, and I feel like social media can definitely be a double-edged sword, right? We kind of all found out about this news via social media, and then you later find out so many different touching stories from different individuals. Are there any that you have been able to read that really just like touched on who Oscar was?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start to see some of the player tributes about how much he was leading the team behind the scenes that nobody really knew, because he was a senior and all this meant to him, and he had so much more perspective and appreciation for what he had gone through. And so he was doing a lot behind the scenes, and his path was inspiring players to see him go through it and be outward with it. And he treated everybody with the same smile, same joy. He had this charismatic, magnetic personality that just made everybody feel close to him. Every time I saw him, I didn't have to approach him. He was already saying hi P to me. And he was just that kind of guy. He wasn't looking, he was a perfect team player too, because he wasn't worried about shots. He played a role. He played a heavily defensive role, which doesn't get a lot of fanfare, but his career Division I GCU record in blocks came within one of the steals record. Had got all defensive team in the past in the WAC. So he just embraced those kind of things without anybody knowing.
Well, Paul, we want to thank you for taking some time out. Obviously a very tough time there at Grand Canyon University, and sharing your perspective on the life of Oscar Frayer.
Thank you. And we appreciate everybody who's reached out to GCU. And if anybody really wants to get a feel of what his personality was like, there's a GCU videographer, Jake Jackson, did an incredible job of capturing him in a video that's on the GCU YouTube channel. And it's been viewed 1 million+ times on social media. It's crazy. It'll make you smile and cry all at once.
Well, we appreciate it, Paul, and best of luck to you and the GCU family as you guys move forward.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. That's Paul Coro. Coming up next, we have the WAC Volleyball Tournament coming up this week. We're going to talk to Mike Jordan from New Mexico State. You're listening to the WAC Podcast.
We would like to thank our sponsors of the WAC Podcast, Hercules Tires and Adidas. Now, back to Eric and Rachel.
Welcome back to the WAC Podcast. Excited to have Mike Jordan, the head coach for New Mexico State Volleyball, on with us. Coach, how are you?
I'm good, Rachel. Thanks.
Good. I'm so happy to hear that. Coach, obviously, the volleyball tournament coming up this past weekend, but let's talk a little bit about this season. I saw a few interesting stats when I was looking up the team today, and you're number 1 in assists per set in the nation, in the NCAA, and number 2 in kills per set. What has allowed you to get that done this season?
Well, we passed the volleyball pretty well most of the time, and we've got a lot of really good arms. I've been impressed with offensively what we've been able to do over the course of this season, obviously, especially given the fact that we didn't have a whole lot of practice time. It's been a really good year in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it's the strength of our team, certainly, is our ability to generate points offensively, and we've done a really good job of that.
Coach Jordan, Rachel and I were talking earlier in the show. This is the 1-year anniversary of the WAC Podcast, and obviously it was created during the pandemic, and we had to kind of adapt to the times and what was going to be happening. I don't think we thought a year ago that in the fall sports would not be happening in the fall, that they would be happening in the spring. And as a coach, I mean, how did you adjust to that in terms of having the fall season in the spring?
Yeah, it was, Eric, it was very difficult. With our state in particular being almost completely shut down from late October, we didn't have a team practice, I think after October 7th or something like that. We went in groups of 5 for a little bit, and then in all of November, all of December, the beginning part of January, we were completely shut down. So it was a difficult adjustment. And it's not just the missed practice time, it's the strength and conditioning. We missed all that. So when we were finally given the ability by our administration to go out of state and practice in Tucson, I think the second week of January, we hustled over there. We got a few practices in, and we just had to make the team understand that there were going to be a lot of hurdles in our way. And it was just important that we try not to think about it, that we just go out and compete, make good use of our practice time, take care of ourselves, and do the diligence with the COVID protocols and everything. And I give my team a lot of credit for sacrificing a lot in order to try and make this happen. But, they wanted to compete, and they've been given that opportunity. So it was frustrating and it was hard, but we're also grateful at the same time.
Coach, for you, what was the hardest part about this season?
Oh gosh, Rachel, there's a few things. Juliana Salanoa, who's the first team all WAC performer and a senior this year, didn't get to play because of COVID. She would have played in the fall, but her nursing school restrictions and the state quarantine rules and everything have stolen her senior year from her and her from us. And that's very difficult when you see a player lose their senior year. Having to not practice at home for the longest time, having to go on the road, be away from family. We went back and forth a little bit, just not knowing what was coming next. There's no structure. It was just sort of, let's wing it, try and find a gym and go do the best we can. Not being able to play home matches in front of our home fans. We played nothing but neutral site games until the last 2 matches of the season. Here, we were finally able to play in the Pan Am, but without fans. So it's not the same, obviously. I think all those things, are real difficult. And I know our student athletes, when they're given the opportunity to compete, they're excited to compete. But at the same time, they've had to sacrifice and, like I said, jump a lot of hurdles that are not usually there.
Coach, you mentioned you're kind of nomads for most of the season. You played in Tucson, you played in El Paso, got to finish up there in Las Cruces. Potentially, does that help your team, though, in terms of getting ready for a tournament and potentially, further on?
Maybe. I don't know we've never done it before. I don't know the answer to that question for sure. I know that it's been tiring, and that's what I worried about the most. Like I mentioned before, we weren't even allowed to do any strength and conditioning in the latter part of last year. And so I'm curious how it's taken a toll on us. You can tell we were kind of struggling a little bit the last couple of weeks. We're tired, so we've taken some time off and just rested. That's the downside of it. The positive might be that, yeah, we are accustomed to playing on the road, and it's really not that big a deal to us. Just, we go, I jokingly said a couple of times in different interviews, if they put the net out on concrete somewhere, we'd go out and play there too, so what? Let's just go do what we got to do.
Play no matter what. Coach, nearly perfect record. I feel like I'm going to be a Debbie Downer kind of when I ask this question, but a nearly perfect record, only 1 loss. What went wrong in that match?
We went high air. You give Utah Valley credit for doing some good things. Obviously, they did a lot of good things that match. I don't, when you look back at it, it's just pretty easy when you look at the numbers to see that we served and attacked and too many of the balls went out of bounds. I think their defensive effort was really good. They did a good job of making us work for our points. And as the rallies got extended, we just had one of those nights where we couldn't hit the ball in bounds well enough and made some critical mistakes. And it happens every once in a while, unfortunately, but we got past it and turned it around the next day and won. So but I hope we learned from it, a little bit. And I think it was good for us in a sense too.
Coach, when you have a long win streak like that, I think it had been since 2018 since you had lost a WAC match, and he did drop that one against Utah Valley. Sometimes you talk to coaches who are on those long win streaks, and sometimes having that loss prior to the tournament sometimes helps refocus the team. Did you see after that, did the team respond?
Yeah, I was not happy with the way we responded during that match in particular. I thought we didn't handle the stress very well. It had been a long time since our backs were against the wall, like you mentioned. And I think that was the one thing more than anything that was like, mentally, when it's not going well or you're not playing well individually, you have to be a good team person. I use a soup can analogy all the time. When you go shopping, you buy your soup cans and you put them in the grocery bag and you put them in the back of your car. And if it tips over and the soup cans are rolling around the back seat, it's pretty annoying and it's distracting. And I think that's important for our players to understand that, regardless of how they're playing individually, if they're struggling, they can't be a soup can. You can't be a distraction. And I think we learned from it, but time will tell.
You'll play the winner of Chicago State versus UTRGV come Friday afternoon. What can fans expect from the Aggies in this tournament?
Well, I hope we do a lot of the things we've been doing, Rachel. I think we defend hard. We give ourselves transition opportunities, and we've got a lot of point scorers. And if we're aggressive and competing well, we're fun to watch. And I think that's when we're at our best, is when we're in that transition game and just kind of bringing it at teams. I hope we don't get passive or tentative or worry about making mistakes. You just want to go out there and trust your teammates, trust yourself, and go make plays.
Coach, I think I might have some soup cans in my car. Something keeps rolling under the seat, and I can never figure out what it is, and makes all kinds of noise when I'm driving. But Coach, as far as you mentioned earlier on, Juliana Salanoa was not able to play this year, and obviously she would have been a big part of the team. Yeah. And in retrospect, though, you also had some freshmen step up this year. Did you anticipate that your freshmen would have the impact they would have this year?
Well, we were hopeful, with the graduation of Annie Acosta at libero, we were uncertain who that would be coming into the season. Darian Markham has done a good job there. She's a really good athlete. She's still got a ton of room for improvement, which is exciting. But she's done a good job. She's had a great freshman year. And then obviously Victoria Barrett on the outside. Kat Kelly's been dealing with hamstring and rib injuries and hasn't really been available to us much at all this year. And Victoria stepped in and has done a great job offensively. I think she's handled herself for the most part in the stressful situations pretty well. Freshmen are freshmen. They have their good moments and their bad, but they've both brought some athletic ability to us and had very good freshman years. And then there's been some other players, young ones that really haven't gotten much notoriety at all. They're role players, but they're important. You pull a libero off the bench at 22 all or 23 all to come in and be a serving sub. And we've had a few of those players that have done that for us as well. And I'm really proud of them. I think they've handled themselves pretty well throughout the course of the season in very stressful times. I mean, it's not a lot of fun right now. There's no college football or basketball games to go to on campus. You're sitting in your dorm room a ton, and you're not even in classes interacting with people. And so it's pretty monotonous, and I think they've handled themselves well.
Coach, for you, what are you able to do to help them try and adjust to this life in this season?
We just keep talking to them, Rachel. It's difficult. There hasn't been a lot we've been able to do. Obviously, we try and get together with them and just have the conversations and say, keep your head up, it'll change, it'll get back to, there'll be some normalcy again. Eventually you'll get to do those fun things that college students like to do, and you'll get to meet more people. And, but until that happens, we just got to keep going along on our monotonous days and making the best of them. And, when you've got a lot of players like we do on our roster, I think that helps a little bit because you've got a lot of different people you can interact with. If it were the same 12 or 15 people all the time, but we've got like 22 on our roster. So you can branch out a little bit and go hang out with some different people once in a while.
Well, Coach, congratulations on another WAC championship in the regular season this year. I'll be in Orem here in a few days to see you, and Rachel will be watching us on ESPN Plus.
Great. Look forward to seeing you guys.
All right. That is Mike Jordan, head volleyball coach at New Mexico State, joining us on the WAC podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website at wacsports.com.